The public transit dome hummed with the controlled chaos of a frontier colony trying to pretend it was civilized. Captain Marcus Vale pressed his face against the transparent aluminum viewport, watching New Meridian's sprawling settlement stretch toward the horizon beneath a sky painted purple by the crimson nebula's distant glow. 3 weeks as the colony's newest survey pilot, and he still felt like a tourist gawking at the impossible. Next stop, Administrative District 7. The transit system announced in the melodious tones that marked it as Chiralian technology. Please remain seated during atmospheric adjustment. Marcus settled back into his seat, reviewing mission briefings on his data pad, while the transit capsule glided through vacuum tubes that connected the colony's scattered domes. Evacuation route surveys weren't exactly glamorous work, but somebody had to map safe passages through the nebula in case the fragile peace between humans and Chiralians finally shattered. The capsule hissed to a stop at District 7, and Marcus glanced up from his reports to watch passengers shuffle on and off. Most were human colonists heading to work shifts, but a few Chiralians moved among them with the fluid grace that marked their species. It was still strange seeing them in civilian clothes instead of the military uniforms that dominated his cultural briefings. Then she sat down beside him, and Marcus forgot everything he'd been reading. She was breathtaking in a way that bypassed rational thought entirely. Her silver hair cascaded over shoulders that curved with elegant strength, and her skin bore the distinctive metallic markings that identified her as high-born Chiralian nobility. But it was her eyes that truly captured his attention, deep violet pools that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom despite her apparently youthful appearance. "Excuse me," she said quietly, her voice carrying musical undertones that the universal translator couldn't quite smooth out. "Is this seat available?" "Of course," Marcus replied, scooting over to make room while trying not to stare too obviously. "I'm Marcus Vale, survey pilot, new arrival." "Lystra Velthara," she responded, settling gracefully into the seat. "Strategic Planning Division." They sat in comfortable silence as the transit capsule resumed its journey through the colony's arterial network. Marcus found himself stealing glances at his traveling companion, noting the way she held herself with quiet confidence and the subtle intelligence that sparkled in her violet eyes. "Beautiful day," he said finally, desperate to make conversation. "The nebula storms have been particularly striking," she agreed, following his gaze toward the viewport where cosmic phenomena painted the sky in impossible colors. "Not the nebula," Marcus said without thinking. You're beautiful." The words tumbled out before he could stop them, born from honest appreciation and the kind of social awkwardness that had plagued him since academy training. He immediately wanted to crawl under his seat and hide until the next ice age. The reaction was immediate and catastrophic. Every Chiralian in the transit capsule went statue, still, their conversations cutting off as if someone had thrown a switch. Lystra's violet eyes widened with what appeared to be shock, and her elegant features cycled through expressions Marcus couldn't begin to interpret. Did he just? One of the Chiralian passengers whispered in their musical language. "During civilian transport." Another added, "Alert the council immediately," a third voice commanded. The capsule's automated systems chimed with incoming priority communications, and Marcus watched in growing alarm as official seals appeared on the display screens around them. Whatever he'd said, it was apparently significant enough to trigger colony-wide alerts. "Marcus," Lystra said carefully, her voice carrying harmonics he hadn't heard before, "do you understand what you just said?" "I made an inappropriate comment about your appearance," he replied, feeling heat rise in his cheeks. "I sincerely apologize. It was unprofessional and—" "No," she interrupted, her musical voice taking on urgent tones. "In Chiralian culture, when filtered through the universal translation matrix, the word beautiful carries connotations of worthy of alliance or deserving of partnership. Your statement has been interpreted as a formal declaration of political intent." Marcus blinked. "Political intent? You have just publicly declared me worthy of the right of shared command, Lystra explained, her expression mixing sympathy with what might have been panic. According to ancient protocols, this constitutes a binding review of joint leadership qualifications. The transit capsule shuddered to an unscheduled stop as emergency override systems activated. Through the viewports, Marcus could see security vessels converging on their position from multiple colony districts. Joint leadership of what? He managed weakly. Lystra's smile was sad and complicated. Civilian evacuation protocols for the entire nebula region. Congratulations, Marcus Vale. You've just accidentally volunteered us both for one of the most dangerous political positions on New Meridian. As security teams surrounded the transit capsule and official voices crackled over the communication systems, Marcus reflected that survey pilot training had definitely not prepared him for this particular type of first contact scenario. So, he said, trying to inject some levity into what was rapidly becoming the most embarrassing moment of his career. On a scale of 1 to interplanetary incident, how much trouble are we in? Lystra's laugh was like crystal bells caught in starlight. Let's just say you might want to cancel any plans you had for returning to Earth anytime soon. The security teams were boarding the capsule now, their expressions suggesting this wasn't the first time they dealt with accidentally triggered alien protocols. Through it all, Lystra sat beside him with quiet dignity, and Marcus found himself thinking that if he had to accidentally propose to someone, at least he'd chosen well, even if he had absolutely no idea what he'd actually proposed. The colony's administrative headquarters looked like someone had tried to merge a government building with a crystal cathedral and given up halfway through. Marcus sat in what was politely called a consultation room, but felt more like a very comfortable interrogation chamber, watching holographic displays cycle through his personnel files, while Administrator Chen paced behind a desk that probably cost more than most survey pilots made in a year. 3 weeks, Vale. 3 weeks you've been on my colony, and you've already managed to trigger a Class 7 diplomatic incident. Chen's voice carried the particular exhaustion that came from dealing with bureaucratic nightmares before breakfast. Do you have any idea what you've done? I called an alien woman beautiful, Marcus replied, accepting a cup of something that looked like coffee and tasted like liquid regret from a servo droid that moved with suspicious efficiency. Apparently, that means something different in their culture. Something different. Chen pulled up a holographic display showing colony population distributions. Vale, you've just declared yourself a candidate for joint command of every civilian evacuation route, refugee processing center, and emergency protocol in the Nebula region. That's 47,000 colonists whose lives could depend on decisions you're not qualified to make. Marcus studied the population figures with growing unease. The numbers were much larger than his briefings had indicated, and the distribution patterns showed just how vulnerable the scattered settlements would be if the peace accords collapsed. What exactly does this right of shared command involve? He asked. Before Chen could answer, the room's walls chimed with an incoming priority transmission. The holographic projector activated to show a distinguished Chiralian male whose silver markings indicated extreme age and authority. His expression suggested he just discovered something unpleasant in his morning nutrition supplement. Administrator Chen, the figure said, his voice carrying harmonics that made Marcus's teeth ache. I am Warsinger Thexus of the 3rd Concordance. We must discuss the human's declaration immediately. Warsinger, Chen replied with the careful politeness of someone diffusing unexploded ordnance. Captain Vale's statement was clearly a cultural misunderstanding. I'm sure we can resolve this through proper diplomatic channels. There is nothing to resolve, Thexus replied coldly. The human spoke binding words in the presence of the translation matrix. According to protocols established during the first compact, his declaration triggers mandatory review for the right of shared command. Marcus leaned forward. What happens if I refuse this review? Warsinger Thexus fixed him with a stare that could have melted titanium. Then you will be classified as a deceiver of intent, someone who speaks alliance words without meaning them. Such individuals are considered threats to colony stability and subject to immediate expulsion. And if I accept it, then you and Strategic Planner Lystra will undergo trials designed to test your worthiness for joint command of civilian protection protocols. The Warsinger's smile was all teeth and implications. The trials have a 60% survival rate. After the transmission ended, Marcus sat in the consultation room's artificial silence, processing the magnitude of what he'd accidentally triggered. Through the room's windows, he could see both human and Chiralian security forces taking positions around the administrative complex. "There's something else," Chen said quietly. "Intelligence reports suggest unusual activity in the nebula's outer reaches. Long-range sensors are picking up ship signatures that match Void Seeker radar patterns." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's climate control. "They're using the political chaos as cover." "Exactly. These raiders specialize in hitting colonies during government transitions or diplomatic crises, if they think we're distracted by internal politics." The door chimed softly, admitting Lystra Velthara accompanied by a security escort that looked more ceremonial than protective. She'd changed from civilian clothes into what appeared to be formal strategic planning attire, flowing garments that incorporated holographic displays showing real-time colony status reports. "Administrator Chen, Captain Vale," she said formally, "I've come to discuss our mutual situation." Chen activated privacy screens around the consultation area. "Strategic Planner Lystra, I trust you understand the complications this incident has created. I understand that Captain Vale spoke honestly about his impression of me, and that our cultural differences have transformed a moment of appreciation into a political crisis," she replied with diplomatic precision. "I also understand that 47,000 civilians may pay the price for our government's inability to manage the situation sensibly." "What are you proposing?" Marcus asked. Lystra touched a control on her garment, and holographic displays materialized around them, showing detailed evacuation scenarios. "The right of shared command exists for a reason, Captain. During times of crisis, civilian protection requires coordination between human and Chiralian authorities that current bureaucratic structures make nearly impossible." The displays showed refugee processing centers, evacuation routes through the nebula, and emergency shelters scattered across New Meridian's surface. Marcus could see immediately how political divisions and territorial disputes would slow response times in a crisis. "Joint command would override those bureaucratic barriers," he said, understanding dawning. "Exactly, but it comes with a price." Lystra's violet eyes met his directly. "Both commanders must remain on New Meridian permanently, serving as neutral arbiters between human and Chiralian interests. You would never be able to return to Earth." The weight of her words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Outside, Marcus could see survey ships continuing their routine patrols, mapping the very evacuation routes he might soon be responsible for protecting. "How long do we have to decide?" he asked. "The rite must be completed or formally rejected within 7 standard days," Lystra replied. "After that, political pressure from both sides will make any decision impossible to implement." Chen's communication panel chimed with incoming reports. "More ship signatures detected in the outer nebula. Whatever's coming, it's getting closer." As Marcus looked at the evacuation scenarios surrounding them, at the population figures representing thousands of families who'd come to New Meridian seeking a better life, he found himself thinking that his simple compliment about beauty had opened a door he'd never expected to walk through. The question was whether he had the courage to step across the threshold. The Strategic Planning Center existed in the heart of New Meridian's government district, a crystalline chamber where holographic displays showed every aspect of colony operations in real time. Lystra had summoned Marcus here after their official meeting with Administrator Chen, claiming they needed to discuss evacuation protocols away from the political pressure cookers that both their offices had become. "Coffee?" she asked, gesturing toward a beverage synthesizer that looked like it had been grown rather than manufactured. "Please. Though I have to warn you, I've been drinking nothing but liquid regret since this whole thing started." Marcus accepted the cup gratefully, noting that she'd somehow programmed the synthesizer to produce actual Earth-style coffee instead of the nutritional supplements most aliens considered adequate. "I did my research on human preferences," Lystra said with a smile that transformed her from strategic planner to someone he might. The holographic displays around them showed the colony's current defensive posture. Human and Chiralian patrol ships following separate routes that left dangerous gaps in coverage, emergency shelters that operated under different protocols, evacuation plans that required approval from 3 different government bodies before activation. "This is what we're working with," Lystra said, gesturing at the displays. 47,000 civilians protected by a command structure designed by committee and implemented by politicians who have never seen actual combat. Marcus studied the tactical information with growing alarm. Those gaps in patrol coverage. A coordinated attack could hit 6 different settlements before we could respond. 7 actually. You missed the mining station in Sector 12. She manipulated the displays to highlight additional vulnerabilities. The Void Seekers specialize in exactly this type of multi-vector assault. They've been observing our patterns for weeks. "How do you know that?" Lystra's expression grew grim. "Because I've been tracking them. Long-range sensor data shows ship movements consistent with reconnaissance operations. They're waiting for the right moment to strike. Which would be when we're paralyzed by political infighting over an accidentally triggered marriage protocol." "Exactly." She moved to another set of displays showing refugee processing capabilities. "The right of shared command would grant us emergency authority to override bureaucratic delays and coordinate unified responses. Joint commanders can activate evacuation protocols without committee approval." Marcus walked among the holographic projections, seeing the colony's vulnerabilities laid out in stark detail. Every delay, every jurisdictional dispute, every political consideration that would cost lives in a crisis. "There's something else," Lystra said quietly. "The joint command position comes with access to restricted Chiralian defensive technologies, shielding systems, sensor networks, even some limited combat capabilities that could help protect civilian populations. In exchange for permanent exile from Earth. In exchange for the authority to actually make a difference when it matters most." She turned to face him directly. "Marcus, can I ask you something personal? After I accidentally proposed to you in public transit, I think we're past formal boundaries." Her laugh was like music played on crystal instruments. "What made you become a survey pilot? It's not exactly a glamorous career path." Marcus considered the question while sipping coffee that tasted like home. "I wanted to explore, to see new worlds and help people build better lives. Survey work lets me do that, mapping safe routes, finding resources, making sure colonists don't settle in places that will kill them. And now I'm realizing that all the safe routes in the galaxy won't help if there's no one with authority to use them when civilians need rescuing." Lystra activated another display showing her own background, strategic assessments, defensive planning, crisis management protocols she developed over years of military service. "I've spent my entire adult life preparing for the day when New Meridian's peace accords would fail. Every simulation, every scenario, every contingency plan assumes political cooperation that simply doesn't exist. Until now. The right of shared command was designed for exactly this situation, when normal government structures become obstacles to civilian protection rather than enablers of it. They stood among the holographic representations of New Meridian's scattered settlements, watching real-time status updates that showed ordinary people going about their daily lives with no idea how precarious their safety had become. "There's something I need to tell you," Marcus said. "When I called you beautiful, I wasn't just being polite. I meant it. Not just physically, but intellectually. Watching you work with these tactical displays, seeing how you've dedicated your life to protecting people you've never met. That's genuinely beautiful." Lystra's violet eyes reflected the light from the holographic projections around them. "And there's something I need to tell you. In 3 years of strategic planning, you're the first person who's looked at my work and seen the purpose behind it instead of just the political implications. So we're both impressed with each other's dedication to protecting civilians. And we're both facing the choice between personal freedom and the responsibility to use our combined authority for something greater than either of us could accomplish alone." The displays around them chimed with incoming reports. More ship signatures detected in the nebula's outer reaches, patrol schedules delayed by jurisdictional disputes, evacuation drills canceled due to political tensions. "How long do we have before those raiders make their move?" Marcus asked. "Based on their current positioning, 72 hours, maybe less." Lystra manipulated the tactical displays to show projected attack vectors. "They'll wait until our governments are completely paralyzed by the right controversy, then hit multiple targets simultaneously. And if we accept the right, then we'll have the authority to implement unified defensive measures and coordinate evacuation procedures without waiting for committee approval." She paused, studying his face. "But we'll also be committing to spend the rest of our lives on New Meridian, serving as neutral arbiters between human and Chiralian interests." As Marcus looked at the evacuation scenarios surrounding them, at the vulnerable settlements scattered across New Meridian's surface, he found himself thinking that his moment of honest appreciation had led to the most important decision of his life. The question was whether he could live with the consequences of either choice. The attack came at dawn, colony time, when most of New Meridian's residents were beginning their daily routines. Marcus was in the Strategic Planning Center with Lystra, reviewing final evacuation protocols over cups of coffee that had become their morning ritual, when the first plasma strikes lit up sensors across the outer settlements. "Void Seeker raiders, multiple attack vectors," Lystra announced, her fingers dancing over holographic controls as tactical displays materialized around them. "They're hitting Mining Station 12, Agricultural Dome 7, and the Refugee Processing Center at Meridian Point simultaneously." Marcus watched the displays with growing horror as raider ships materialized from hyperspace jumps, their sleek Predator hulls launching coordinated strikes against civilian targets. The colony's defensive response was immediate but chaotic, human and Chiralian patrol ships scrambling from different bases, following separate protocols that left dangerous gaps in their coverage. "Emergency Command, this is Survey Captain Vale," Marcus said into his comm unit, requesting permission to implement unified evacuation procedures. "Negative, Captain," came Administrator Chen's voice, tight with stress. "Evacuation authority remains with Civilian Command pending resolution of the Joint Leadership question." "Defensive coordination, this is Strategic Planner Lystra," she tried on her own channel, requesting authorization to coordinate emergency response across all sectors. "Request denied," War Singer Thexus replied coldly. "Military assets will not operate under civilian strategic planning without proper command authority." Around them, the tactical displays showed the horrible mathematics of bureaucratic delay. Refugee ships fleeing the processing center were being picked off by raiders while rescue vessels waited for authorization to launch. Settlement evacuation procedures stalled as human and Chiralian officials debated jurisdiction. Children were dying while politicians argued about proper channels. "This is insane," Marcus said, watching another civilian transport disappear from the sensors. "How many people have to die before someone authorizes a coordinated response?" "None, if we're willing to accept the authority to prevent it," Lystra replied, her violet eyes reflecting the urgency of the tactical situation around them. "Marcus, the right of shared command can be implemented immediately during crisis conditions. We don't have to wait for the formal trials." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if you're willing to accept permanent assignment to New Meridian, we can override these jurisdictional disputes right now and start saving lives." Marcus looked at the displays showing families fleeing their homes, while raiders systematically destroyed everything the colonists had built. Through the center's windows, he could see smoke rising from distant settlements as plasma fire lit up the purple sky. "What do I need to do?" Lystra activated an emergency protocol he'd never seen before, causing ancient Chiralian recording devices to descend from hidden alcoves in the chamber's ceiling. "Place your hand on the command nexus and speak the binding words. Once we're joined as co-commanders, we'll have authority to override all bureaucratic delays. And I'll never be able to leave New Meridian." And 47,000 people might actually survive the next few hours. Marcus pressed his palm against the crystalline command nexus, feeling power surge through the colony's defense networks as ancient protocols recognized his bioelectric signature. "I, Marcus Vale, accept the right of shared command for the protection of New Meridian's civilian population." Lystra placed her hand beside his on the nexus. "I, Lystra Velthara, accept the right of shared command for the protection of all colonists, human and Chiralian alike." The recording devices pulsed with satisfied completion as binding seals formed around their joined hands. Instantly, the Strategic Planning Center's displays shifted to show unified tactical control. Every defense platform, every patrol ship, every evacuation route now responding to their combined authority. "All units, this is Joint Command," Marcus announced over the colony-wide communication network. "Implement Emergency Protocol 7. Civilian evacuation takes priority over all other operations. Military assets will coordinate with evacuation vessels under unified strategic planning," Lystra added. "No ship operates independently until the crisis is resolved." What followed was the most efficiently coordinated military operation in New Meridian's history. Human and Chiralian forces worked together with seamless precision, their patrol ships forming protective screens around refugee convoys, while evacuation vessels ferried civilians to safety. The colony's defensive platforms focused their fire to create corridors of safety, allowing rescue operations to proceed under cover. "Raider formation breaking off from Agricultural Dome 7, the tactical display reported. "They're not prepared for coordinated resistance." "Mining Station 12 reports successful evacuation," came another update. "All personnel safely aboard rescue vessels." Marcus found himself working in perfect synchronization with Lystra, their different backgrounds complementing each other as they coordinated responses across multiple crisis zones. Her strategic brilliance provided the framework while his survey pilot experience identified safe routes through the chaos. "Last refugee transport is clear of Meridian Point," Lystra announced as the final civilian vessel reached safety. "Raider vessels are retreating to hyperspace." The strategic center fell quiet except for the gentle hum of cooling holographic projectors. Around them, tactical displays showed New Meridian settlements secure, evacuation centers processing refugees, and patrol ships resuming normal operations under unified command protocols. "Damage report," Marcus asked. 17 facilities damaged but no civilian casualties," Lystra replied, her voice carrying exhaustion and relief in equal measure. "The coordination protocols worked. We actually saved everyone." 6 months later, Marcus stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Unity Command Center, watching human and Chiralian children play together in the recreation areas below. The Void Seeker threat had been eliminated through the kind of coordinated military operations that were only possible under joint command, and New Meridian had become a model for interspecies cooperation throughout the sector. "Any regrets?" Lystra asked, joining him at the viewport. Her strategic planning attire had been replaced with the comfortable clothing of someone who spent her days managing humanitarian operations rather than crisis responses. "Only one," Marcus replied, putting his arm around her waist and marveling again at the elegant strength that had first caught his attention. "I really wish I could see Administrator Chen's face when he reads our quarterly efficiency reports. Joint Command status, accidentally established through casual compliment. Civilian protection protocols operating at peak efficiency. Please send more coffee. Think the colonial administration has a form for that." She laughed, the sound harmonizing with the command center's ambient systems, and leaned against him as they watched the sunset paint New Meridian sky in shades of hope and possibility. "You know," Lystra said thoughtfully, "I never did properly thank you for calling me beautiful." "Please don't encourage me," Marcus replied quickly. "I'm still discovering new alien protocols I accidentally trigger every time I open my mouth. Last week I apparently volunteered us for a cultural exchange program just by complimenting the food synthesizer." "Actually," she said, with a mischievous smile that reminded him why he'd been attracted to her intelligence in the first place, "there is a Chiralian tradition about shared appreciation between bonded command partners." "Nope," Marcus said, backing away from the viewport. "Absolutely not. I've learned my lesson about casual comments and cultural protocols. From now on, all my observations about your remarkable strategic brilliance and stunning physical presence stay locked inside my head." Her laughter followed him as he fled toward the safety of their shared quarters, where hopefully the only protocols he'd have to worry about were the ones involving dinner plans and entertainment system programming. Sometimes the most important words are the ones that slip out when you're being honest. Sometimes the biggest compliments lead to the most meaningful commitments. And sometimes, calling an alien strategist beautiful can transform two strangers into the guardians of an entire world. Not bad for someone who'd only intended to make polite conversation